The morning of February 19, 1945, did not begin with gunfire. It began with silence so heavy it felt deliberate, as if the island itself were holding its breath. Long before the first shots were fired, before the smoke rose and the dead were counted, Iwo Jima sat beneath a dull gray sky, its volcanic slopes scarred from days of bombardment that had reshaped the land into something barely recognizable as Earth. The black sand along the beaches absorbed heat and sound alike, swallowing footprints as quickly as they were made. Somewhere offshore, engines rumbled low and constant, a reminder that the world beyond this island still existed, even if it felt impossibly distant to the men about to step onto the sand. At 0730 hours, Private First Class James Akinor crouched behind a jagged coral ridge, his boots half buried in ash and grit. The coral was sharp enough to tear skin through fabric, and the sand clung to everything: webbing, sleeves, sweat-soaked hands. He had been told to stay low, to keep his profile small, but instinct had already done that for him. Fear had a way of compressing the human body, pulling shoulders inward, tightening muscles until every movement felt deliberate and fragile. At 22 years old, Akinor had already lived long enough to know that war did not announce the moment it was about to kill you. In his hands was the Winchester Model 1897, its wooden stock scarred and darkened by use, its steel receiver cold despite the rising heat. The weapon looked out of place among the sleek lines of M1 Garans and Browning automatics scattered through the platoon. It felt heavier than it should have, not just in weight but in meaning. Sergeant Henry Delaney had handed it to him 3 days earlier without ceremony, as though passing a tool rather than a weapon. Delaney's voice had been calm, almost casual, but his eyes had told a different story. "Once you take this inside," he'd said, "you don't hesitate. You don't freeze. You don't turn around. If you do, you're dead." Akinor had nodded, because nodding was easier than asking questions he didn't want answered. Ahead of him rose the coral ridge that hid the Japanese bunker complex, a position that intelligence maps labeled with clean lines and numbers that meant nothing to the men who had already died trying to take it. 8 Marines from his platoon were gone, killed in the last 48 hours alone. Their bodies had been dragged back when possible, left where they fell when not. The ridge did not look like a fortress. It looked like broken stone and shadows. That was the deception. Beneath that rock waited Lieutenant General Isamu Fukuda's men, sealed into a world of darkness and concrete. Fukuda had spent months preparing this section of the island, overseeing a transformation that few aerial photographs could capture. His engineers had carved tunnels directly into solid volcanic rock, reinforcing them with steel beams salvaged from destroyed ships, binding earth and metal together into something that could survive direct hits from naval artillery. His soldiers lived underground, slept underground, ate underground. The surface of the island was expendable. The war would be fought below. When the first waves of Marines had landed earlier that morning, Fukuda's men had not fired a shot. They waited. They listened to boots hit sand, to shouted orders, to the chaos of men organizing under fire that had not yet begun. Then, when the Americans moved inland, machine guns erupted from invisible ports cut into the rock. Marines fell without ever seeing who had killed them. To Fukuda, it was confirmation that his strategy was working exactly as intended. What Fukuda could not hear from inside his command bunker was the sound that would soon haunt his defenses, a mechanical clack, sharp and unmistakable, echoing through tunnels never designed to carry such a noise. The Winchester Model 1897 was not new. It had first been designed before the turn of the century, its pump-action mechanism conceived by John Moses Browning at a time when trench warfare had not yet shown the world what industrialized killing would look like. The version in Akinor's hands had been manufactured in 1942 in New Haven, Connecticut. One of hundreds of thousands rushed into production as the United States scrambled to arm itself for a global war. It held 6 shells in its tubular magazine, each shell packed with 9 lead pellets of double-aught buckshot. At close range, those pellets spread outward in a brutal cone, turning narrow spaces into slaughterhouses. What made the weapon truly dangerous, though, was what it lacked. There was no trigger disconnector. If you held the trigger down and worked the pump, the gun would fire every time the bolt closed. Slam fire. It was not something advertised. It was something discovered, quietly, in places where men fought at arm's length in the dark. Sergeant Delaney had demonstrated it behind the supply tents, his movements efficient, practiced. "Don't think," he'd told Aukenor. "You think, you slow down. You slow down, you die." The rhythm had been drilled into him. Pull back hard, push forward firm, keep pressure on the trigger. 6 shots in under 4 seconds. Faster than most submachine guns. Devastating under 30 feet. Inside the bunker ahead of Aukenor, Private First Class Tetsuo Nishida checked his weapon for the 100th time. At 19, he was already a veteran by Japanese standards, hardened by training and indoctrination that had prepared him for death long before the Americans arrived. He had spent 14 months learning how to fight underground, memorizing tunnel layouts, practicing firing drills in pitch darkness, learning how sound behaved in confined spaces. His Type 99 light machine gun rested on its tripod, its barrel aligned with a firing port that overlooked a natural amphitheater of coral erosion. Any American approaching the entrance would have to cross 30 yards of open ground under interlocking fire. Nishida believed in the bunker. He believed in the engineering that surrounded him. He believed that the Americans would break themselves against it, just as they had elsewhere. He had never been told about shotguns. The smoke grenades detonated at 1,500 hours, releasing thick white clouds that burned the eyes and lungs. Aukenor moved forward alone, his heart hammering so loudly he wondered if the Japanese could hear it. 27 steps. He counted them because counting gave him something to hold on to. The bunker entrance appeared suddenly out of the fog, a black rectangle cut into stone, 4 feet wide and 5 feet tall. Beyond it, darkness swallowed everything. The first burst of machine gun fire shattered the quiet. Bullets slammed into coral, ricocheting through the passage with a scream of metal on stone. The noise inside the bunker was unbearable, magnified by the confined space until it felt like the air itself was tearing apart. Aukenor pressed himself against the wall, feeling impacts through the rock, waiting for the brief pause he had been told to expect. When the machine gun stopped, even for a second, he moved. The shotgun roared, a thunderclap in the darkness. Buckshot exploded against coral and flesh alike. He slammed the pump and fired again, advancing step by step, holding the trigger down, letting the weapon do what it had been designed to do. The muzzle flashes turned the darkness into stuttering snapshots of chaos. Walls, bodies, smoke, movement. The psychological effect was immediate. The sound alone was overwhelming, each blast reverberating through tunnels never meant to contain it. Nishida tried to respond, tried to bring his machine gun back into action, but the rhythm of the shotgun was relentless. He had trained to face flamethrowers, grenades, rifle fire. He had not trained for this. 30 seconds later, it was over. Aukenor emerged from the bunker breathing hard, his shotgun empty, his hands shaking despite his effort to keep them steady. He reported calmly, because that was what Marines did. Inside, the bunker was silent in a way that felt unnatural, as though the space itself had been stunned into stillness. The effect rippled outward. Other units, stalled for hours, began requesting shotguns. Positions fell faster. Casualty rates dropped. Japanese commanders sent frantic messages through buried telephone lines, ordering modifications, barriers, choke points, anything to stop the Americans from closing the distance where the shotgun ruled. At position 23, those modifications worked, briefly. A shotgun assault was halted, Marines wounded, attackers forced back. It was proof that the weapon was not invincible. Both sides adapted. Engineers brought explosives. Flamethrowers returned as support rather than spearheads. Tactics evolved by the hour, paid for in blood. When Okanor's squad was assigned to position 37 days later, the Japanese defenses were no longer static. Steel plates blocked passages. Killing zones were calculated. Lieutenant Sato had studied every report he could find, turning the bunker into a maze designed to neutralize shotgun range. The first assault failed. A flamethrower operator died in a fireball visible half a mile away. The second assault succeeded only because American tactics had evolved again. Explosives shattered the barriers. Smoke filled the tunnels. In that chaos, the shotgun reclaimed its dominance. Sato died in the deepest chamber, his final preparations undone by a weapon he had never anticipated when he began building the fortress months earlier. By the time Iwo Jima was secured, the island was littered with lessons written in coral and blood. The Winchester Model 1897, a weapon designed for hunting birds, had rewritten the rules of underground warfare. Its legacy would echo far beyond the island, influencing doctrine, shaping future battles, and proving that in war, the most devastating tools are sometimes the simplest. And for James Okanor, crouched behind coral on that first morning, it would remain something else entirely. A sound, a rhythm, a moment in darkness where survival depended on moving forward when every instinct told him to stop.